Everybody, so you guys are able to communicate with us via chat. This is meant to be an interactive sort of, really us hearing from you guys, and we have a cool tool to be able to do that, but really want to keep you guys engaged. So chat with us, use the link that we're going to give you to also send some answers our way in just a moment. This is really for us to come together and share some of the knowledge. We, of course, have some things we would love to share with you guys on certain areas of our expertise, but all of you are also experts in the particular fields that you're in, which is education in this case. So please add your comments, thoughts, suggestions, questions, all of the above. This will even add more to this masterclass. So, all right, we can share the screen now, Ivan?
Absolutely. This is where we start.
And Ivan, you let me know if there's any delay from my side, just in case, but should be good to go. All right. So, before we introduce ourselves and why we're doing this, let's just look at kind of the context of what this is all about today. So there's a lot of discussion right now happening around how we can best prepare future generations for the future of education, future of universities, future of work. And we always look for ways to upskill students in a way that is relevant and future focused. But what about us? What about the educators and the teachers, right? Some are going to become leaders at the school and thus also need to be aware and have the skill set and processes and systems in place that help us get to the next level in our career, right? So this masterclass is for you. The future is happening now. The education industry, of course, has undergone a major shift in recent couple of years, and it will continue to do so. Frankly speaking, we cannot predict what the education landscape will look like over the next 5, 10, 20 years. Well, maybe 5 we can kind of gauge, but 10, 20 years, we have no idea. It's if anybody says this is how it's going to be, it's nonsense. It doesn't make sense. We cannot predict the future. I mean, just think about the last 2 years. We have sped up the way we work in terms of just being digital and going fully online in so many cases. And that's been talked about for 10 years. And we expedited it in like 6 months or just a couple of months even, right, when the pandemic. So that just shows us a reality that certain things will drive us to go even faster. So we cannot predict, but what we can do is look at how we as individuals can prepare to make sure that we are changing as well with the future that is coming and that is already here, essentially. So, as teachers and educators, it's our role and responsibility that we continue to do what we can do from our side, because at the end of the day, that is how we help others grow and develop around us, in this case, being our students and colleagues as well. So that's a bit about that. Now let us just introduce ourselves, just 2 minutes. So my name is Elena Agragimova. I've actually started my career in education. So working in different institutions and organizations around the US as well as the UAE. So my background is in higher education, having done some work with high schools as well in different parts of the world, really kind of preparing students and parents for that transition from high school to university, and then for students from university to the corporate world. So education is something that is very close to my heart. In recent years, I've shifted towards corporate learning. So really working with corporations and helping their staff upskill. But upskilling not only staff but also students has also kind of just been the driver for me in my entire career. So right now what I do is, of course, along with Ivan, we develop not only individuals and organizations but also teachers and educators like yourselves in schools and universities. And we also work with different entities in the Middle East. So that's a bit about me. I've been in the UAE for 8 years. In a couple of months, it'll be 8 years since I came here. Originally, I'm from Russia, grew up in the US, got to do this sort of things all over the world. And it's a privilege to have had my hobby turn into a career and now a business along with the other half of this venture. Ivan, go ahead.
And that's about the other half. So my name is Ivan. Funny enough, in fact, my background has nothing to do with what I have been doing most of my life. I am an engineer, so I like numbers. I get passionate. In fact, Elena, this you know quite well about science, and this is what drove my interest into behavioral science in order to understand a little bit more how the brain processes information and what makes us do what we want to do, what makes that people acquire knowledge, are successful, are thriving at work. And this is something that has become also my passion. I don't come from an educational background. In fact, after my engineering studies, I work in the corporate world, mainly in the area of marketing and corporate strategy. But the challenge that I observe is that when you're responsible for driving from the idea of the strategy to practice is quite challenging because it requires change. And we, in my previous corporation, we were investing heavily, a lot of money, and educating, in fact, the employees, and very little was transforming real acts. When you wanted to transform an organization, we didn't see so much of the results. And this is where the question came to me. So what makes people, in fact, drive the change or change themselves? So I guess my interest also started at the individual level. Coming from an engineering background, I had the challenge of being socially awkward, you know, like most of engineers, you cannot interact or in the most efficient way with other people. And you know what? This is something that you cannot learn in a class. This is something that you cannot learn through a book. It's something that requires another set of skills that we are going to develop a little bit more during this master class. Now, the interest the fact that Elena and I, we joined forces together is because of her magnificent background in education, the tools that she was using in order to help people in corporate could help other people, in fact, to thrive, to feel good at work. And this is the main mission, in fact, of what we do at Bessern. Bessern, by the way, it means just to improve. It's a German word. I grew up in Switzerland, and 70% of the population in Switzerland speaks German. So what we did is to develop a mix between using the best of behavioral science together with technology in order to help people, in fact, accomplish their goals, be self-actualized. And we spend a lot of time also speaking about it in tier 1 magazines like Entrepreneur, Forbes, lately the National, and we are based in the UAE, in fact, and we are one of the few companies in tech that are promoted as one of the, how do you say, one of the growing startups. We have been sponsored by Plug and Play, by the Ministry of Education, specifically also because we do a lot of work with what we call the aspect of well-being at work, because most of the skills that people need today also to thrive is to be at their best in their mental in order to be able to transform organizations and be the best they can. So this is the kind of not that short introduction about me and about what we do at Bessern. Elena, we should start. Your turn.
Yes, let's do it. So just to kind of give you a couple of objectives, what do we want you guys to walk away with today? So towards the end of this masterclass, we're just going to touch base on how the future of education is being reshaped. We're not here to tell you necessarily, because as I mentioned, we really cannot predict, but we can start to guess some changes that have already happened, trends we kind of see, and what some of the reports in the future of education fields are saying to us. So we're just going to give like a quick overview of what is happening, what has happened, what is happening, what looks like might be happening in the coming years. So a quick kind of overview. Then we're going to look at, wonderful, we have this macro picture of what's happening in the world of education. On a micro level, us as educators and teachers, what does that mean for us, right? For our own career development. And finally, then we're actually going to give you, and this is Yvonne's science piece. So if you're not a science person, you're with me, and I feel the same way about it, but it is very useful. So it's a very structured approach of how do you actually actually take action and start developing the skills that you need and creating opportunities for your own growth in changing times. And this can be applied anywhere. So no matter where you are, it's no matter, you know, which schools you work for, which region you're in, it's applicable for everyone. So that's that. Let's dive quickly into the, well, first of all, I want to ask you guys a question. So I told you it's going to be interactive. So if you would just take a moment and you just, all you need to do is either take out your phone, take your photo, and it will take you to take a photo of the QR code. It will take you to a website, which is going to prompt you this question that's right there. If you don't have your phone, but maybe you're on a computer, you can also type in slido.com and enter the number 629964 and go ahead and fill in your answers on the website. So what I want you guys to think about and to share with us in a group is, what are the biggest challenges and questions you have right now as a teacher educator as it relates to the future of your career in the field? Like, what are some of the biggest things that are on your mind today as it relates to your career, personal, professional development, essentially? And then we're going to start seeing answers popping up. I'll give you guys maybe 60 to 90 seconds. If anybody has any challenges with the tech, drop it in the chat. So don't worry, if you cannot answer on the Slido, just drop it in the chat. But we prefer you do the Slido. It's completely anonymous, so you guys can just drop it in. Okay, we have one. Irrelevance, job security. Monitoring students real time about their progress, technology. I assume technology is probably around the having the use of the continuous evolving of technology that we have to use. So there's always so many things coming out. Like, how do you even keep track? We're an ed tech company, and sometimes I'm exhausted from technology. Paradigm shift. Job security. Yes, it's a job security. I think for anybody, for any of us, any industry, job security is just gone these days. It really is. But there are things we can do, of course, to make sure we're staying ahead. Learning management system.
So I think that job security is standing out. Really, there is the fear because so many changes, and we are not made for changes, right? As human beings.
Yes. Differentiation. Yep. Lack of motivation. If any of you are having trouble, you can use the chat, huh? So I see that we have only like less than half people have answered so far. So you can use the chat if there's any issues with the Slido. We also had somebody else say professional improvement. Okay. I'll give it another 15 to 20 seconds and then we'll move on just in the consideration of time. Heavy workload. Also says, Aline mentioned, do we really need drastic changes in the way we teach since high-tech learning resources overpasses teachers' traditional ways and students got used lately to be on autonomous way of learning? That's a great point.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that is the big question, right? And that's something I'm going to discuss in the next slide when we look at kind of what the future of education looks like. But keep in mind, we're looking at the macro, and there are solutions for us on individual level. So all these things you guys are mentioning, this is concerns across many industries, in fact. But I think it's just like the education field is just so impacted, and there's going to be so many different changes happening even more, simply because what students require, what the future of work requires is changing. And we have to remember that it's not disconnected. And that's what I think we forget as particularly as leaders in organizations and leaders in education fields is that we keep not talking to each other. Right, Ivan? We almost are not talking to each other, but future of education will directly relate to what the future of work looks like. So, and the funny part is two parties are not talking, but these are both are impacted. This side of organizations complaining that we're not preparing students the right way, and then this side is complaining that it's hard to place students and to help them with with university degrees and all of that. But because the two are not talking, and this is a big challenge. This is, at least from my experience in education over the last 12 years, it's just we're still not talking to each other. So anyway.
Elena, so if we stay a little bit more into what is reflected in this word cloud of words, it is that a lot of the things are very difficult to learn. I mean, job security, how to reassure ourselves. This is not something that you can manage by reading a book or having the experience of going to YouTube and watching a movie. It is kind of the acceptance of all of these changes requires another set of kind of psychological resources so that we can cope with these changes. And this is not made by class, but is more made by the practice. And this is kind of the core of the message that we are going to be using during this masterclass, is about how do we get ourselves into practice that matches our lifestyle, that where we can find out regularly to have a mental process in order to deal with this motivation, with this fear, with the feeling that we cannot cope with. It's going so fast in terms of technology, and we cannot cope or learn new skills. That's something, and including, and I like the point that somebody is mentioning about lack of transparency, how to understand what is going on. And sometimes even we can say that in the management may not know the answer, and they are discovering as far as you do. Managerial bullying, that is something that is quite impactful, and that happens very often.
Great. Thank you guys for this. So I'm hoping that, I think, as you're looking at these answers, it's very relatable, I think, for many of us on this call this afternoon. So it's thank you for the contribution. All right, let's quickly just look into how the future of education being reshaped. And I just want to go through a couple of these points. Again, a lot of this you guys are already experiencing. You probably have experience. You probably have experience on, even have much bigger knowledge than we do, frankly speaking. So as I'm talking about these, do drop in the comments your experiences with some of these things, and also just kind of how do you see it being reshaped, and then we'll address those. So feel free to kind of drop your reflections as I'm kind of talking through this, if there's something you guys want to contribute. Again, just want to make sure that we're all kind of contributing, because we're one team here essentially, and every single person on this masterclass has something to add. So feel free to do that. So just looking at just kind of as the world is changes, right, and we're looking to now embrace this tech futures. How and what we teach in our education system is being reshaped. It has been reshaped in some cases slower than we wanted to, and that's the reality. But the demands of this century and the next one is going to force us. And again, we've been forced to adjust many things in the last 2 years, and it's only going to speed up. So a couple of things we need to consider. Connectedness and collaboration. What does that mean? Meaning that gone are the days, or soon to be, where a teacher is standing up in front of the classroom and kind of just teaching and lecturing, right? Now classrooms almost coexist as physical spaces online, and really kind of flipping the current learning model upside down so that students can actually learn at home. And if you think about it, to the point of anytime, anywhere as well. So we already see a lot of these kind of modern, what do they call it, nomads, whatever you want to call them, of families that are living in different parts of the world and not necessarily spending a full school year somewhere. So as these new generation of parents that are coming up, right? They're going to be having children and hopefully, right, etc. So as they're kind of building these new families, the way they work is different. The way they will be working and conducting their businesses is different, which means that, of course, as families, perhaps they'll be affected, which means that, you know, the anytime, anywhere learning is going to be affected not only at university level, but also particularly in a school level, because these parents, these families could be those modern nomads kind of jumping from place to place. So they will not be in one physical location necessarily for too long. And that's something we see on, already happening. And a lot of it is done via homeschooling, but that's because it's still kind of manageable to do this way. But future-wise, we foresee that that's going to be a trend that's going to pick up. And particularly as, you know, as the world is becoming more digitalized, essentially, there are a lot of online learning programs that are available for school kids already as is. And as we're looking at the future of work and what is that going to require from our student, right, as a parent or as an educator, we have to consider that not everybody is going to look at a traditional school model and say, this is the right model for my child or for where I want to put my expertise. So as a teacher, as an educator, you might say, you know what, I don't want to be in a school anymore. Actually, it might look like I want to be in independent work or something along those lines. So the reality is that now classrooms can be anywhere and students can essentially access information anytime. Learner first, of course. So most professions that each individuals, like in most professions, if we look at the just different industries, individual cases are different. So yet, you know, for example, if you are a patient, a doctor is going to create an individualized plan for you, right? Education should be no different. There needs to be individualized learning plan for each student. And we already try to do this in classrooms, of course, to the best of our abilities, but that's going to be a trend that's going to continue to grow. Future of learning at all levels is individualized. That is the reality, that is a fact, and that is something that we're going to see shifting even more. So, and another point to consider here is, this is something to ponder of, is who is determining right now what is important for a student to know for the future, right? So who is setting the standards of what is an education, you know, what is a K through 12 degree should be giving a student, right? And as the future of work is changing, and we see this already being impacted at university level. So example would be, we have employers coming out and saying, you know what, you know, I'm Google X, or I'm IBM, or I'm, I don't know, Facebook, let's say, or a number of other technology companies. And they're saying, you know, we don't really need university students to have 4-year degrees anymore, but we can train them. So corporates are determining what you know, kind of like what is needed for the future of work, right? So same thing in education, right? So kids that are graduating school, like high school, who is determining, right, like what, you know, what is that piece of paper going to mean? So, and that's something to think about. It right now, of course, we have certain policies and governments and etc. that are determining certain standards, but reality is that's going to change, and it could potentially change drastically. So that's something to think about. And a final point I'll just mention here is, you know, we really need to start taking into consideration the focus on well-being and mental health, essentially. And we've seen this, of course, over and over again over the last couple of years. But the reality is we are very connected yet disconnected. We're burnt out. We're working more, you know, as individuals, as students. Of course, they're not getting the same kind of exposure and social aspects, at least in some parts of the world. So some parts of the world are still online. Some are permanently online. So things are impacted. And the number one thing that gets impacted in these situations is our mental well-being, because change is difficult. It's difficult for us as humans to go through change. So we really need to have a focus on mental well-being. We've seen it drastically become a priority to organizations as well as schools and institutions over the last year or so. And it's going to become more of a priority as well. So, but anyway, Ivan, anything you want to add here?
No, I was just reading the comment from Alina, and I'm fully with her regarding that. She feels, in fact, that the role of the teacher is going towards being more of a facilitator. And she acknowledged the fact that the emotional anxiety has increased. But if we look at that, this is completely true. Students have gone into the mode of not being able to control their anxieties towards the changes, in fact, on how they learn, towards the change of being always connected with technology and always checking, do I have a last homework in my app where I receive all of my homework. But something that needs to be highlighted is that the cases of depression and anxiety within teachers, it is something that is quite well documented and has the rates are higher than in the corporate world, because they have been left alone to learn by themselves how to deal with all these changes. Because and this is something related to somebody who mentioned it in the cloud of words, is about the lack of transparency from the management in terms of how things should be done. They haven't been dealing correctly in terms of the communication, and that has created an additional level of anxiety, dealing with new tools, dealing with a new approach in order to have the students connected with you when you haven't been practicing that before. That has increased the level of anxiety within teachers.
Great. So now we kind of looked at the macro of kind of what's happening, just as a setting the scene a little bit. And now we're going into a little bit more micro, and then I'm gonna hand it over to Yvonne for the actual kind of process and what can we do as individuals. But on an individual level, again, no matter where you go in your career moving forward, this is applicable for all of us, but particularly in fast changing fields such as education and right now. So again, I've mentioned we cannot predict what's going to happen 10, 20 years. Nobody can. Not like realistically, nobody can predict what's going to happen 10 to 20 years. We don't know. But what we can do is look at how we as individuals to do everything that we can to be proactive in our own professional development, in our own creation of opportunities, understanding what's happening on a macro level, having some idea of how it's going to affect us on a micro level. And many of you have already mentioned it, like job security, right? So the questions would be, how can I make sure my job is secure? How can I diversify my skill set, right, to make sure that my job is secure? What is the future of work and education is going to require of me as individuals? What tools, technologies, skills are going to be needed for me as an individual, right? Somebody also mentioned irrelevance. So again, how can I maintain my relevance? How can I differentiate myself? Meaning, how is the brand of me, the brand of whoever is on the call, right? The brand of you is going to stand out compared to everybody else in your particular industry. So what are the actions you need to do? And so what I want us to focus on essentially is that all of this, everything that I've said, is just really around learning, unlearning, relearning, learning what you need to learn in terms of what skills could be potentially useful for the future. What have you seen as the most, if the role of an educator is now a facilitator, what does that mean for me as a facilitator? How can I better engage online if that's where we're going, right? So if the digital is, how can I make sure that I have the skill sets to be engaging online? How can I see what tools and resources are available for me, right? Unlearn, meaning really removing everything we thought we knew about our work and future of work and just how things are done, and looking at, what are the things we need to undo essentially in ourselves, right? On a personal level. And that's also can be obstacle. We're so stuck on doing things the same way because we're used to it, and because change is difficult and change is a threat to us, right? As humans, this is our natural reaction to change, is that, whoa, I don't like it. Like our brain goes crazy when we see big changes, especially big changes. So these things to consider, right? So just looking at how you can relearn, unlearn, and relearn when needed. And the way you find that out is looking at essentially staying curious. So as I mentioned just now and early in the presentation is, what are the things that you see as happening? You are on the ground, you're doing this. So staying curious and then saying, what does that mean for me as an individual? Like looking at future of work reports, there's whole sections on education, right? Looking at what are the experts predicting that's going to happen in the next 2, 3, 4 years, not 10 years, because it's more of just like science fiction at that point, but looking at, next 2 to 3 years, short term, what's going to happen? And so the biggest part of this is, of course, yes, being curious, but also a much larger part of this is the psychological resources. So Yvonne mentioned this in the beginning. We're so focused on skills, like hard skills, right? What do we need? What tools and resources? And those are important. But the psychological aspects, psychological resources that we need to have as individuals, such as resilience, agility, taking care of your mental well-being, making sure you are doing what you need to do to take care of yourself as an individual, that is essential. So for example, just something as simple as a growth mindset. So for those of you who are not familiar with a growth mindset, is essentially the belief that you can improve, the belief that there are things that you can learn and grow, and that there are opportunities for you to unlearn things if you need to. There are opportunities for you to see positives in the challenges that arrive. It's essentially a mindset to have that no matter what is happening, so whatever is happening right now, how can I utilize this challenge in my career for the betterment of myself? Because I can guarantee you that this is where majority of people miss the mark. And that is why majority of people, or according to reports, about over 80% of individuals that are working in different corporations and even institutions are not satisfied with their jobs, burnt out, stressed out, because we don't take time to focus on these psychological resources. We're so focused on reacting to what's happening to us, and we're so focused on expecting that, you know, the institutions or the schools, the leadership, or the governments and countries that we're living in are going to provide us with certain answers. And the reality is nobody really knows, and nobody really knows. So this is where you really have to take complete accountability and responsibility for your own career progression. And psychological resources are a big part of that. Another thing is resilience, right? So again, how do you overcome certain challenges? What are the systems you have in place as an individual that help you go from, you know, fail towards learning and growing through your failures, for example. So I'll pause here because I can go on for hours. Ivan, anything you want to add?
Yes, I just wanted to highlight that so there is 6 different areas that belongs to the to what needs to be taken into consideration when you are an educator or you are a leader. Or there are the three first points are related to how do you manage yourself. It is important to understand that if you want to be a leader or someone who is driving change, first you need to start with yourself. So the 3 first points here are related to how do you manage yourself, and that from point 4 to point 6 is more about how do you interact with others. And you mentioned it, Elena. So this is not something that these are not objectives. So if I receive this list, for instance, I cannot focus on everything. I need to allocate time. You mentioned the fact if we want to learn something about new technologies or how to engage with people, sometimes we lack of motivation, sometimes we lack of time, sometimes there is different reasons that our brain will find out in order to prevent you to do the extra effort. And what we understand is that if you need to acquire a process that will help you in a regular basis to be continuously up to date and at your mental best in order to drive the change in education, you will need to consider to have, first of all, the mindset. So the belief that we can. Secondly, to have the motivation. And the third, you need to have a method. It is not enough if you have the motivation, you cannot learn. Think about simple things in life, like going to the gym. There is approximately 5%, only 5% of people who at the end of the year decides to go to the gym and uses up the full subscription that they bought in December. So despite the motivation that everybody thinks about it at the end of the year, I want to lose weight, I want to look in shape, is not enough to drive the change, because whenever there is a little bit of effort, our brain blocks. So we need to create a method, and this is something that we are going to be discussing a little bit more in order to drive the change, to learn, to acquire the change. So if I relate back to the previous cloud, so people were talking about the fact that it is very difficult to deal with with the changes, the fear that you are going to lose your job. So this is the challenge. So what you can do is to spot what is the tools in terms of the psychological resources that are put in this list that can help you. Is it about mindfulness or how we process our emotions? Is it about resilience because it is just too much and we just give up? The system is too powerful. So I want you to take just some time to identify a specific tool, one that you need today. I want you to be able to think about it because I want to tell you more about how to put it in place. We are not here to talk about big objectives, just learn or whatsoever. We're going to tell you what is the approach that we can do in order to be more successful, depend less on motivation and more on finding a process that makes it easy to be accepted by the brain and that is continuous. So take your time and let's move on. If I can click. So everything starts with how the brain has been formatted. So we all believe that motivation is the key driver for change. Now, there is a famous behavioral scientist called Beji Fox who developed a model. This model, it is simply saying that there is 3 elements that makes change happen. One is the motivation. The second one is the ability. And by ability, I want to define it as how easy is to do the new behavior we want to do. So evidently, if it's something that is very difficult, like going to the gym for 1 hour, 1 hour and a half every single day and having a coach who is going to give us a hard time, is going to be very hard to do. Easy, it would be, why don't I do like 2-3 push-ups during every morning when I wake up? That's super easy to do. It doesn't take so much effort. And the third element for change is to have a trigger, a prompt, something that will remind us to do the new action. So let me get back. There is motivation, how difficult it is, or to do the new action, the ability. And the third one is to have something that will remind us to do the action. What does it mean? Is that if you have chosen any of the previous psychological resources, let's say that today we are always thinking about the job security. We may lose our job because we don't feel at our best. It's becoming more complex. They take someone who is younger, fresh from university, and maybe he knows how to deal with all this technology that we need to use in a day-to-day basis. So there are a couple of steps. Think about like a checklist in order to transform a behavioral change. First, you need to clarify your aspiration. So the brain doesn't understand big statements. It doesn't understand like a big word. The brain understands visuals, images, something that generates emotions. So when you're thinking about, for instance, being more in control of your emotions that are regarding the future of your career, because you feel like maybe you will not keep your job, you don't think about, I want to learn how to keep my job. That is not inspiring for the brain. You need to have an image of how would you feel, in fact, if you had that skill. Let's imagine that you want to be the kind of person who is not continuously thinking about the losing your job. You have to get that image a little bit like a movie of you being happy, being reassured, and not thinking about this anxiety that comes because that there is a risk of losing a job. So you need to have an aspiration. An aspiration is an image, a little bit like a movie that you keep. And the point here is that you need to trick the brain. So by creating an image, you are creating an emotion. An emotion is something that helps in the brain to anchor something that you want to do. Emotions help to anchor. What we want to do is to store this new aspiration not as knowledge, something that we have read or seen in a movie theater, but we want to store it in the subconscious, where we have many routines that have been the formatting of our brain, that what we have heard about us, whatever our parents have told us, whatever the school teachers have told us, gets stored in our subconscious. So by having the image, like point one of your aspiration, anchored as an image that generates emotions, you are helping it to be a little bit stronger than just to have a statement. So you imagine the kind of person that you want to be for a specific action. So in this specific case is going to be, I want to be the kind of person who is not fearful about the future. The second point, in order to use this process, is to explore behaviors options. So an aspiration is not a behavior, it's an image of how happy we are if we overcome our specific challenge. A behavior would be what can help me out to be happy and reassured about my future. I can have behavior one as an option. I can write every single reason why there is low risk or low statistical proof that the worst can happen. That's something that we can do. So writing down the list of things why I think it will not happen to me to lose my job. The second thing is I could start every morning doing something that will relax me in terms of my emotions. Let's say that you are familiar with meditation. I could do that. These are two options. I could have many other options that will help me to get to my aspirations. What is important is that there are clear actions. Meditating is an action. Writing down reasons why it will not happen to me is an action. Using mindfulness, like kind of reminders to be to feel understand our emotions could be another action. So we need to explore a list of different behaviors that are going to help us out to reach our aspirations, actions. It needs to be something where we have to act. Now, many of the actions may not be possible to do. Let's imagine, and this is the point 3, we need to find something that matches our current lifestyle. Our current lifestyle is limited by 1, time, money. If it costs a lot, we are not going to do it. If we don't have the time, we are not going to do it. If it is too much effort, or I don't have the skill and I will need to learn the skill, it will make it more difficult. So we need to find out of the behaviors that you wrote down in step number 2, which ones are matching or easier to be done, matching our current lifestyle. For instance, in my case, I have tried meditation in the past. I cannot focus enough, Elena. And that's something that we have been discussing quite heavily. So this behavior, I cannot do it. If it is about meditation, I cannot do it. Mindfulness, well, it depends on how long time and when I can do it. Writing down what my feelings in a piece of papers and checking finding out the reasons why there is low risk that I'm going to lose my job is something that I can do. The 4th step, it is starting small, super tiny. You have to think that in the model of Beiji Fox, the ability plays a big role. how difficult it is plays a big role. So we have to make it so easy that it becomes automatic. A little bit like driving a car. You don't think, sometimes you are driving for hours and you're not thinking about how to reach from work to home, and it goes naturally. So by making things very small, you are tricking the brain in order that he doesn't perceive it as change, because whenever there is change, there is these hormones that start kicking out and saying there is fear. And when there is fear, it affects your motivation. So you need to start super small. Like, let's say doing mindfulness. No, you don't have to think about mindfulness to be an exercise that you do 1 hour every single day. By the way, when you are super tired after work, or sometimes early in the morning where we have to take care of the children, it is very difficult to do things. So we need to make it very small. If it is about mindfulness, saying, I will do 3 minutes of mindfulness or reflection or just breathing exercises for 3 minutes during the day. It is about, because the most difficult thing in change is to start. It is about making it so easy that there is nothing that will prevent us, specifically not the lack of time, to do this, the action. Writing down, it is something that also doesn't need to be like, I need to write a book. It can be just as simple as I will find out the 3 reasons or 1 reason why I will not be fearful. So I will write down for 2 minutes. So making it super, super small, it is something that helps. The human behavior is so complex that we always think that in order to change, it needs to be drastic. Like you need to change from one day to the other. But the rate of success between people who do drastic actions that says, as of tomorrow, I'm going to do it every day, 2 hours, is very low for the kind of people who succeeds to achieve the personal goals. In most of the cases, we use the theory of the compound interest. What if every single day I am improving by 0.1% or 1%? If I'm doing in the long term, I have more chances of continuing doing until it becomes a routine, a habit that will happen for the longer term, and I'm not going to drop it. So starting small is super important. The 5th point is about finding your triggers. Most often, we think that a trigger is going to be an Outlook reminder or an alarm that we put in our mobile. Finding your trigger is about using an existing routine that you have today. Let's imagine that my existing routine is that I wake up in the morning, I take my cup of coffee, and I open my laptop. That is a routine, something that I'm continuously doing every single day because I'm working from home, is to have my coffee and open the laptop. So a trigger would be whenever I have my cup with me, finish that I have already poured the coffee inside, I need to think about doing the new action, which could be mindfulness, or it could be meditation, or it could be writing down something specific about my emotions. So finding your triggers, it is about finding habits that you are doing today. It is something that you do recurrently. So what do? You take a shower every single day. You take a coffee or a tea every single day. You put your clothes, when you arrive from work, you change clothes. These are something that you do every single day. So you use it as a trigger for the new action. When you do that action, you do this action that's happening, you will do the new action that you need to change your behavior. The 6th point, and this is something that it is quite important, is about giving the signal to the brain that you are progressing, giving the dopamine aspect of your inside of your brain to see that when you are progressing or when you have achieved to do a certain action, you need to be happy. And we need to communicate it to the brain so that it becomes the new action that you want to do becomes addictive. It can be as simple as singing the song, your favorite song, or doing something that I do very often is to do this when I achieve my routines of the morning. And it can be several things that will just signal to the brain you are doing the right thing. So every time that you have achieved the new behavior, you need to celebrate it, and you find your own way of celebration. So driving change, specifically when we are talking about psychological resources, like when am I going to have the time to have this growth mindset to learn new things about technology? Do I have to think about inscribing myself in a university? Do I have to think about doing an e-learning in LinkedIn that will last 6 hours? No, you could transform this as simple as micro actions that you do. Imagine that every time before going to bed, it is about reading 5 pages of a book. Imagine if it is that when you wake up, and this is something, by the way, that I do, is to go to YouTube and find something new to learn that is related to my specific area of interest, but it has to be new. So I spend 5 minutes. 5 minutes is something that is short. So the big actions about taking classes, getting a new degree in order to develop a growth mindset, forget it. You will certainly drop your e-learning from LinkedIn after class number 2 or 3 because you don't have the time. So how about transforming it in something that is sustainable, that has a compound interest that you are not going to drop in the short term? And this is about how we use the behavior design process in order to leverage on potential psychological resources that you will need today in order to thrive in your work, in order to become the leader that you want to be. And by leader, we are not just saying about having a position, a managerial position, a leadership position in your institution. It is about how to influence others, right? That's in fact the right definition about leaders. So how do I manage myself first before thriving in terms of the communication and interactions with others? Anything that you want to add, Elena?
No, but I'm just mindful that we have 5 minutes scheduled left, and I'm just curious if anybody has questions. What do they think about this behavior? Well, maybe just go back to that slide, Ivan, just real quick. I'm just curious, like, do you have any questions about what Ivan just mentioned, the 6 steps? Is it pretty straightforward, the behavior design? Do you have an idea of how you can get started with it, with the actual actions? It was clearly okay. Good.
And by the way, Elena, this is something that is worthwhile to mention. We are aware that this is, I mean, I went quickly through the process, but for all of the participants today, what we would like is to offer you an access. We have like we call it the 10 days challenge. Let me go quickly to that.
Okay.
So
okay,
we have created like at the 10 days challenge is about using 5 minutes every day in order to create new behaviors. So in small videos of 2 minutes, you can learn every single day how to put into practice these micro habits. So, and what you can do is to use the QR code, and that will give you access to our app. Inside of the app, you just have to put your name, you log in, and the idea is that you need to follow it up for 10 days, and it will take you less than 5 minutes every single day. And by the way, we are always, very often, always, in fact, online. If you have any questions, we can answer back to you. So this is the QR code to be used. There is someone who is asking a question.
Yeah, no, they're just saying that they need to really have time to kind of rethink the priorities. And so in the app, the 10 days challenge has tons of like resources, and this model that Yvonne just explained, the 6 steps, are also in there. We also, I think the habit tracker is in there as well, right, Yvonne?
Yes.
It's also included. So there's actually a tracker you use to track if you're implementing certain things. So you can use it for unlearning bad habits as well as learning new ones. But it's I think Ivan's pulling it up so you can see. Are you?
Sorry?
Are you pulling up the screen or no?
No.
Oh, okay.
What I wanted to do is to share the link. If you cannot do the QR code, with this link, you can access the app, and it's for free. It is 10 days. It takes only 5 minutes per day. We give a little bit of additional resources inside. And I hope that you can benefit, in fact, because what we say is that learning is changing drastically. And you have seen it with kids. So they Google every single thing possible, and they want to learn it like in less than 1 minute. So that's the way we should also adapt for the learning. So that's why the story about doing micro learnings and basing it in practice in something that is engaging is important, in fact, for us to learn.
Yeah, so I see that people already, we had a few people already join. So we got you guys on there. But yeah, but check out the 10 days challenge. I think it goes into depth. So just to summarize what we talked about, we looked at the macro status of what the future of education looks like. What does that mean for us as individuals, essentially as professionals in this field? And then also looking at the actions, and the actions, it takes practice. So the 10-day challenge will give you that practice that you guys need to really solidify the process. And it also has some other resources. So I think you'll find it interesting, and you can chat with us if you get stuck anywhere. Chat with us like in the chat, just choose in the chat, find our names, and have a chat with us on individual level as needed. But yeah, and this we can stop recording, I think, Yvonne, by the way. We're good.